Good afternoon. Welcome along to this ordinary meeting of the Performance Policy and Partnerships Committee. We have an apology from Councillor Kett, and joining us on Zoom, Mrs. Coote, Councillor Clark and Councillor Abbott. Would somebody like to move the apologies received?
I'll move the apologies.
And seconded by Councillor Scalp. Thank you. I'll put that all in favour.
Aye.
Against? Carried. One item in the public forum from the Anderson Park Trust. Mr. Anderson and Mr. McAllister, welcome along if you'd like to come in and take a seat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
The floor is yours, gentlemen.
Look, thank you. I'm Craig McAllister and Robert Anderson, who's...
Yeah, I'm a family descendant of Sir Roberts. I'm a great-grandson, so being impaired with the Robert Anderson name, I feel it's my responsibility to serve the trust and try and get the house back in working order.
So, look, thank you very much for the opportunity to address you and take any questions. For the brief period of time we've got, just will briefly outline what we propose and then just open it to questions. So obviously the house is being strengthened at the moment, and that's a great thing, and I think a lot of the public, of course, very keen and eager to get back in, but getting it strengthened, of course, just really gets the door open. We all appreciate there's still a lot more work really to be undertaken in the interior of the property. It still will need a bit of a kitchen upgrade. Well, it doesn't have a kitchen, and toilet upgrade, and there's still a bit of work to do on fire egress, so we're still not going to get the full use and functionality of the property from day one. So that's why in our material that we're prepared to support occupation, we're proposing a staged approach. So initially we'll only be proposing open it on limited terms, probably in the weekends, and that'll be for about a year or so, and then to a full week, and then ultimately 7 days. And during the course of getting it open, we propose to open it up for the public to have a look through it, and then we're proposing to have a full-blown open day when the weather allows, to have a good opportunity for an event that's suitable to reopen it to the public. And from there we'll also look at making some capital improvements to the property as funds permit. Like anything, the trust is run by volunteers, and of course a voluntary group is never without risks to the council, but we're pretty confident that we've got the skill base to run the operations in the house, and also to set the KPIs, agree the KPIs with council, and work with council to achieve that. And I must just add that we've been working with the council now for 4 or 5 years, and look, it's been a journey, but the council's always been very, very supportive. And more recently, with Richard McGuire involved, we've had a very good and do enjoy a very good working relationship. So we believe that our relationship's on a good footing, and we sort of look forward to working with the council in a partnership approach going forward.
Thank you. Councillors, it's an opportunity if you have any questions for Mr. McAllister or Mr. Anderson. Councillor Scalp.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks, team. Just in the sense of the interest, Craig, going forward with some of the remedial work going on, has there been any more activity or interest from outside operators, given that it has been seen to be moving along? Has there been a bit more activity or a bit more interest being shown by the community or the wider sector, in the sense of the building possibly being used in the future once you have your stepped approach going forward? Is that
not from operators? So we ultimately want to develop better facilities within the house, and possibly bring in a cafe or operator to run that side of it. I haven't received any expressions of late, but I have received inquiries from people wanting to use it. So, well, I mean, that's quite positive. People are sort of aware that the house is getting to the point that it is available for use. And so I've received emails from people wanting to know sort of what costs and when it's going to be available, all those sorts of things. So there's been a positive approach in that context. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Craig, as far as furnishings go for inside, you've got your own. Have you got your own art collection that you that you're going to put up?
It's a bit of a moot point. So,
Or did someone take it?
well, there was the art collection left by Kathleen Kirkby,
Right.
who was a daughter of Sir Robert Anderson and
Right.
Lady Elizabeth Anderson. She donated an art collection to be held at the house.
Right.
That's with the Invercargill Art Gallery, and it's a discussion to be had as to where that ultimately rests.
Okay. So apart from art, what about you still got the furniture? I remember quite intriguing furniture.
Yeah, so there's some furniture stored at the moment. I think it's down in the
Yeah.
old museum area, and the council's indicated that they're happy to make that available to the trust to put back into the house and use, but it'll still be retained. The ownership will still rest with the council. But from our point of view, we're not really so interested in ownership of these things per se. It's just having the right.
It's just making it look and feel
Yes, that's
and
right,
everything when you walk in.
Mm.
And there's still only one toilet, is that right?
Yes. Well, one ladies, one gents.
Okay.
Yeah, and so obviously there's going to be, it's a moving feast. There is still work to be done, and we know that. We have to accept that, but we're happy to work with what we've got to get the place open and available for the use for the public again. And I think that's what the public really want.
I think you're right. We, the Telecom Art Awards. You remember those? They used to be there.
Mm.
You're right. You're about the same age as me.
Mm.
Yeah. And that's the type of function that are you looking for? That sort of.
Yeah, not the only function, but
No.
that is the sort of function that
Yeah.
we'd want to make it available for. Absolutely, people wanting to hire the house and use the house for functions or small conferences or weddings or some form of anniversary type get together. We've also in discussions with Richard, and councillors might want to clarify that with him, talked about the council might want to use it as well for its own purposes, and so the arrangements will facilitate that. So, for example, if councillors wanted to have a meeting out there, then obviously it'll be made available for that or for anybody else within the council to use it.
We're actually looking for an admin building, so.
Yes, so at a generous discounted rate.
Any other questions? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Craig,
Graham, can you drop the mask and pull the mic?
Yep. It's jammed. I have to lean forward. Could you just clarify the state of the kitchen at the moment? You said the kitchen upgrade, but is it at a commercial kitchen stage where they...
No,
not at all.
unfortunately,
I didn't think so, but
the
I
art
thought just
gallery
asked.
people completely gutted what was the kitchen,
Yep.
so there is no kitchen,
No,
really.
so any functions would have to be external catering.
Correct,
Yep.
correct,
Thank
which everybody
Yeah.
says is doable, and I accept that. But ultimately, we do want some form of heating type kitchen where people can bring in plates of hot food, keep it warm, fridges to keep stuff cool, and cleaning facilities and the like. And so we don't necessarily want a full-blown commercial kitchen.
No, correct. Thanks, Craig.
Other questions? If not, thank you for the update, and thank you also for the feedback on how you feel things are progressing very positively now. That's really good to hear. So I've had the same feedback in reverse on how things are progressing with the trust. So thank you for your continued involvement and interest, and for coming along to the meeting this afternoon.
Look, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and on behalf of the trust, we just want to acknowledge the input that the council's had, and it's been a very good process to date, and we look forward to it continuing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillors, that brings us to the minutes of the Performance Policy and Partnerships Committee meeting on 12 April. Somebody wish to move the true and correct? Councillor Scouts, Ms. Reverend Cook. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Whoops. Is Mira available? We've got Te Reo o Te Puni I Tipiti Wharanga. Mira and Steve, welcome along. Thank you very much for the report.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Your Worship, councillors. On behalf of Mira and I, we'll take this report as read, but I do just want to recognise the efforts that a number of staff have played in this, and as you can read through the report, this process has taken some 2 years from an idea created from a small group of staff to where we are today. And a number of those staff don't work with us, such as Darren Edwards. So we just want to heed their efforts. if I may make a couple of points, this is a direction of travel to help our staff and our team build awareness and build knowledge and skill, but also build confidence as we improve our partnership with iwi Māori and the Rūnaka locally. And so it's not a mandatory training requirement, but the feedback that we've had from the survey indicates that there's a strong desire to improve knowledge, to improve skill, and to build confidence. So when we do engage with tikanga, with te reo, that our team can do so confidently. We know what we're doing, we know what we're saying, and we know when to say it. We also know when not to say things as well. And I think this is a really key focus of this strategy. It's about building our organisation's capability. And so we're really happy to take any questions from here. Thank you.
So if I can kick off, is this a process that was initiated by staff wanting this opportunity?
Yeah, correct. Back in 2020, yep, that's about the same yet. We had a staff forum and a couple of staff got together and thought that actually we didn't really reflect the moves that the organisation needed to make in terms of our partnership with Māori. So they got together and they started identifying what were the causes, what were some of the opportunities, and that's how we've come to this strategy today.
Externally, and can I ask what sort of feedback you've had when we've engaged with iwi and they've been aware that council has been making these moves?
I'm mindful we've got two members from the Rūnaka, and I might, if you're okay, Mr. Chair, pass to those members.
Absolutely. Pania, would you like to kick off?
Ngā mihi kia koe. Just in support of the document, just following when Evelyn and I came in, we met in regards to the document. We made some subtle changes and also acknowledged that there was no mana whenua representation on the group. However, in saying that, I think just what the staff have been proactive about in developing and pulling this Māori language strategy plan together is amazing. You know, it was of what they've done to date. Also, even though we spoke about dialect, we didn't want to cause confusion. Right? Therefore, we've actually taken the approach around using a generic Te Reo Māori approach, so that it encourages people and enables people to feel comfortable in pronouncing Te Reo Māori kupu. Yeah, so no, I mean, I can speak on behalf of myself, Evelyn can speak on behalf of her. I've supported the strategy going forward. There's probably only a couple of wee things I would add into the Ngā Putanga me Ngā Hohena, which is the outcomes and actions, and that would be linking it to professional development or your performance and development reviews in some way or form, as well as job descriptions going forward. But I just think it's amazing that that we're on this journey and that we've got staff that are driving it.
Thank you. Reverend Cook.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so I possibly was engaged a little bit before Pania, just through some conversations from outside, particularly through my engagement on SMAG board. But I too would like to thank the staff for driving the initiative themselves rather than having somebody come with an edict from on high. I think when you own something, when you help design something, then you feel much more committed and engaged with it. Learning te reo is a journey. It's a journey for everybody, no matter whether they start when they're 1 or whether they start when they're 36 like me. and you never stop learning. So I look at this and say that this is the first step of many steps, that I'm happy to walk beside you and encourage, but not impose what my role is on you, but open the option there. We have some people who have dialects of their own within the team, and I'm really mindful that as a living language, people need to be able to embrace what their tupuna left them, not what my tupuna left them. So the uniqueness that is the kaitahu reo, it's appropriate that we put it on stuff that reflects the city, but for staff who are learning to speak and who are learning to do things, I just applaud the fact that you are doing it, and I am so grateful to those whose energy drove it, because it doesn't come out of nothing. You have to have a passion and you have to really want to see it through to have made all the effort and work that you have done. So, ka mihi atu kia kōrua, kia koutou katoa, e hanga i tēnei kaupapa hira hira mō tātou. Thank you to those who have worked on this most important kaupapa for all of us, because it is for all of us, not just for staff. Kia ora.
Thank you. Let me take the opportunity to mihi te mera as well, whose name sits on this report. Thank you for your mahi in preparing this and bringing it to council and bringing in this change opportunity for our staff. It's valued. So I'm very happy to move the 3 recommendations on the agenda. If someone's Reverend Cook, it's open for discussion. Councillors? Councillor Clark and then Councillor Crackett.
Yeah, Steve, just some clarification on what Pani and Evelyn said. Both had a slightly different twist for me. So going forward, are you looking to the links that Pani talked about, that Te Reo would be linked to job descriptions and professional development? Does that mean there'd be a requirement for all staff to go down this path, given that Evelyn said that you've got to want to go on this journey? I mean, I've been involved with an NGO where we had about 18 months of this, and it was really positive, but we didn't force it. We let people come forward that had a desire. So when Pania suggests professional development, would that be on an individual basis, or is that something you want across the whole organisation?
Thank you, Councillor, through you, Mr. Chair. I think that's a really great question, and it's one that we've talked about. It's very much an individual approach at this point. We recognise the journey, and as the 2 representatives have well pointed out, this is an individual journey based on individual capability and experience and confidence. We're not at a point as an organisation where we can make this a structural requirement, and it hasn't even been discussed. I think we're at the starting point, and we'll follow your, as your example indicated, it's an evolving capability that we're seeking.
Yeah, thanks to that, Steve, because my experience is that compulsion doesn't work, and as people get excited about it, and some will, that will encourage others to get excited as well. Thank you.
Just before I come to Councillors Crackett and Soper, Mrs. Coote, you had your hand up.
Yeah. Just in regards to the response, I think I was more future thinking and looking forward, because when you write cultural competencies in a plan, what are you measuring? So that was why I raised that. That makes sense?
Thank you.
Through you,
Councillor
Mr.
Crackett.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Steve.
Yeah, just through you, Mr. Chair. Look, one of the reasons why we undertook the survey was to establish a baseline of competence and baseline of confidence and awareness. And so we do have some good data now that we hope to go back to in about a year's time to see have we shifted the dial. So we do hope to be able to measure our progress through this strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Crackett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just mindful that even this morning we had a submitter say to us, why would you have Māori translation on your submission documents or your consultation documents? Because nobody understands it. And that's just, from my perspective, so devastating, because this is one of New Zealand's national languages. It's a lost language because of wrongs of the past, and it is absolutely up to us. And thank you for showing leadership on this and making it so, because if we don't revive and do everything that we can to bring the reo back, then future generations will just be very much like that gentleman sitting in front of us today going, nobody understands it. So the fact that we're even showing leadership on it, like in my other role that I have in my career, one of my people that I sit on the leadership group with said to me, even the council are looking at doing this and bringing reo or te reo Māori into naming and things like that, and what we do in the corporate world. So showing leadership, I think, on this is just incredible, and I really mihi what you're doing. So thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you. Councillor Soper.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I also wanted to pay tribute to the staff who have got us to this point. The revitalisation of the Māori language, the Te Reo Māori, is just so important for us as New Zealanders, and I also wanted to refer to the comment from one of the submitters this morning and many other comments I've heard over many years in political life about Te Reo being a dead language, and why would any New Zealander want to learn it, and why is it important in our culture. It is. I have Welsh heritage as well. I dream of the day when we can say of Te Reo that, like the Welsh language, it has been revised and revived, and you travel in Wales and you hear school children talking in Welsh on public transport. Of course, you may know that Welsh is now compulsory for children from 5 to 16 in schools, at least as a second language. And that has been an example of the importance of the revival of language, of treasuring and saving our tonga. That was also a disappearing language, which is no longer a disappeared language. I'm really thrilled we've got to this point. I'm really thrilled that staff have played such a big part in making sure that we have this strategy. I really encourage you to keep developing it. I'm really pleased that we are seeing a much more bicultural look to this whole council, to the way as staff are much more confident in speaking Te Reo. And I didn't want it to pass without saying thank you to every staff member who has contributed to bringing it to the table. And to conclude, I'll just say, ko te mana kai, e te miro, no nā ti nā hira, ko te mana kai, e te matorangi, no nā ti ao. The bird who eats of the miro, the forest is theirs. The bird who eats of knowledge, the world is theirs. Thank you for bringing back a great part of New Zealand's knowledge. The value of the reo cannot be lost.
Thank you. Reverend Cook, then Councillor Pottinger.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to clarify for the benefit of Councillor Clark. Ms. Cook and I are not at differences, we just come at it from a different place and we're looking for different things. I believe that as governors it is not for us to say what should be in an employment contract or should be part of performance appraisal unless we are talking about the Chief Executive, who is the only person whose performance appraisal is our business, as I understand the world. So whilst I look forward to the day when some competency in te reo and me ona tikanga and knowledge of the treaty and all those things are written into the job descriptions of staff that this organisation employs, that is not within my purview. I would support it, I would endorse it, I would encourage it, but I cannot impose it. That is my perspective. And so for the benefit of Councillor Clark, that is the reason why I didn't go and didn't look at that as part of what I thought was the aim of this particular policy. However, should it arise from the adoption by the staff and the organisation, I would applaud that, and I would be there to support it as actively as I could. Thank you.
Thank you. Notice Mrs. Coots found a new icon as well. Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you. So far we've talked about staff and them coming on board with this, but obviously we can't, you have to balance it with the elected member side. Now, here we sit with the council meetings that read a prayer that's written on a board every day, and we basically in our meetings, Darren and I chair, there is no, and basically it's pretty blank what we do, and so for elected members and how we operate, is it up to the mayor to lead that? Because obviously you really need elected members to choose their own way forward, is that right? Rather than try and say, well, you got to do what staff are doing. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Councillor Pottinger is raising questions that are best asked of the governors and not of the staff.
No.
And it was our intention as staff that, possibly best colloquially put, we lift our game, and that this be the subject of discussion with an incoming council as a change in the next triennium. The purpose for it coming here was A, so that you would see it a little more in the organisation. B, we are keen to see Te Reo Māori being incorporated into the identification of meeting rooms. So we didn't want you to get lost when you were looking for that which is currently referred to as the Chief Executive's meeting room. And there'll be other changes, but most of them will be left at the governance level until the incoming council in the next triennium.
Okay, the reason I raise that this is an ultimate leadership thing. So in an ideal world, you would see the mayor bringing this to the table and getting everyone on board, rather than a resolution coming to council and you have to vote on it, which will be quite awkward, you know. So I'm just wondering if, you know, obviously that has to come, as Claire said, but there needs to be a balance, and the staff are into this now, and obviously we've got a wee way to October, and then...
So if I may, it would be appropriate for us perhaps to ask that an opening karakia could be gifted to us. We can't select one. It would be, and if I can leave that as a discussion between our mana whenua representatives to create less of a cultural desert in the meetings, would be a positive step forward.
Yeah, but I do believe I'm trying to get at is it is the mayor who would lead this, as it's come down from the CE.
I think, as you're seeing, any councillor can take that step.
Yeah, I'm just...
Yep. Any other comments, councillors? It's been moved and seconded, was seconded by Reverend Cook. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Well said, Mira. Jamie and Anna, the performance report. Welcome along to the meeting. Who's leading off?
Okay, so what we've got here is the performance report for the 9 months ending 31st of March 2022. I'll take the report as read, but we'll just do our normal few highlights out of the report. I'll start with the financials and then we'll move on to the level of service side of things. So up to March, we've got a surplus of 8.2 million. Now, this is inflated mainly because of revenue we've received from subsidies for capital program. So they are just one-offs. They're not going to be continuous, but we can only recognise them as the capital work has been completed. So with the good chunk of the work being done this year, that's why we can recognise it this year and why we've got a big surplus. That will come back by the time we hit the year end to about 5.6 million. Capital side of things, so we're on track to be our largest spend in about the last 5 years. So we're currently sitting at 34 million spent year to date, projecting to get up to about 52. And because of the Stead Street and the Streetscape Stage 1 hitting their peak spends, we're looking very likely to hit that 50 million mark. Net debt side of things, so we're on track to be 38.6 million by year end. Now, throughout the year, we've done a few things. So term deposits. So what we've been doing is we've been actually taking some of those funds out and using them to fund the capital expenditure. So that's dropped from about, used to have about 35 million of term deposits. That's currently sitting at about 25, and there'll be another 7 we'll pull out in the next lot of maturities, which is July next year. We will have some funds come in the last quarter for the sales of some properties, so that will prop up our cash, our bank balance initially, but that will be used up as well. And then we've also drawn down some borrowings to fill some short-term loans to the Invercargill Central Limited, as agreed, for the city centre, and that is just a short-term loan, so it will be repaid to us over the next few years. I'll pass over to Anna.
In terms of the levels of service, you'll see there have been some that have moved to looking like they will not be achieved in this year. The big impact, of course, is COVID. That has hit the numbers attending the libraries and the pools and places like that. So we have a bit of a blip in many cases this year. And so we will, that's probably the notable change in the levels of service. Otherwise, things are tracking pretty similarly to previous quarters.
Thank you. So initially we can get excited when we see the surplus of 8.3 million until we realise that most of it's tagged.
Pretty much, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Chair. Just referring to the delivery of 51.9 million for the year. So that target that you're on target to deliver, are those capital projects meeting budget? Are they also on budget? I mean, they're being delivered, but are they excessive of what they were originally planned at?
Yeah, so all the big roadmap projects, they're all still within their initial budgets that were set within that long-term plan.
Okay, so this is not affecting, right?
No, it's more the phasing of when the spend happens.
Right, this is the phasing of when the spend happens. So we're not seeing price increases here, yet when we look at the annual plan for June to the next June, we're seeing $88 million.
Yeah, so some of that is to do with the phasing. Some of it is to do with new projects. So the museum is in there.
Yeah, just the explanation in the annual plan doesn't reflect that.
Yeah,
it reflects increasing prices, supply chains, all sorts of stuff like that. But that doesn't seem to match up.
So some of those are flowing through as well. So there, for instance, there have been some new projects which come in which will have higher costs than what we initially had thought. But most of those will be able to be covered by the overall project. So what I'm trying to say here is, yes, there are pressures on, but at the moment we're going to be managing within those existing budgets to cover those. But the plan for next year is higher.
We've had pricing already for that, have we?
So yeah,
for some things.
The reports on the 9 months performance. Yeah. We're not
but I'm
looking forward at this stage. We've got that yet to come with deliberations. Patricia.
What I would just reiterate to councillors is that this is about this current year. We've still got to go into the deliberations about what's changed. But what Jamie, I think, is trying to say here is we are having some on some of the non-roadmap projects where they're slipping in time frame, so they're going to move into the next year. So while we might have lower delivery this year, that will come in to next year, and why we've got such a potential little blip, and with a higher delivery required next year.
Look, my basic question is the separation between delivery issues, which I understand, and price escalation. Two different things.
So from the big projects, we've got them covered.
Yeah.
From the smaller projects, there will be pressures put onto those ones. But we're managing the delivery of those smaller ones, so we're not overstepping our boundaries of the budgets.
Right.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions for Jamie. Just want you to run back over the initial bit that you said about the year-end position, and it's influenced by money that we're holding for projects that we've yet to complete and yet to totally fund. What's your forecast for year-end?
On which part? Sorry, I don't understand that.
On the total budget, the total operating budget we've got for council. Are we in a potential surplus situation or not?
So we're in surplus if you include the capital subsidies. If you exclude those capital subsidies, we'll be in a deficit.
So how much deficit are we talking about?
About 1 million. Hang on, no, change that.
Yep.
2, 3. No, it's about 2 million as it comes back in line. 2 million deficit.
So
operations.
Are you suggesting that putting aside the projects that we have external funding for, and we have yet to spend all the money, that on our, I guess what you'd call core other business, we're heading towards an overspend of $2 million?
I wouldn't say it's an overspend. COVID has hit some of our operations this year, and that has affected our revenue as well. We've tried to do our savings to meet those revenues decreases.
I appreciate that. When I look at the performance summary as of 31st of March and the financial performance, I notice that employee costs and other expenses, which sit in the same area, are $1.6 million overspent. Is that a big chunk of the 2 million that's overspent?
No, so that's underspent, not overspent. So when it's a positive variance, it means it's good.
Yep. So when you suggest to us that we've got a $2 million gap between what we forecast at the beginning of the year for income and what we're spending to date, where's the bulk of that $2 million coming from?
So half of it is coming through the revenue line, and half is coming through this cost savings where, well, we're restricting the costs we spend. So it's about a 50-50 split between revenue and expenses.
Bear with me again.
Yep.
If we start off the beginning of a year with $10 in revenue and we forecast on a balanced budget $10 million worth of expenditure, how does reduced income and how does savings that you're suggesting we're making on the expenses side of it create us a $2 million imbalance?
Oh, sorry, I got you now. Yeah, so with the Q4, there is normally a lot more spend that comes through as we do the year-end process. So we also have like annual expenditure, which only hits that last month of the year. So we factor those into the forecast. So it may not look like it now, but when we get to the year-end and annual report, it will come back.
So again, just want to clarify that because it doesn't make any sense to me. So when you do an initial budget preparation before financial year starts off, are you suggesting that you just basically take $12 and you make it $1 a month, or do you factor in costs into the last quarter which fall within that quarter? That's the first thing. And I don't know what the last quarter cost will be if you are suggesting that we still have an expenditure that exceeds our revenue by $2 million.
So on the phasing side of things, so we do phase where we can. So when we know specifically when costs are going to be spent, we will phase those.
Sure.
If we are a bit more uncertain, then we will spread that phasing across the year evenly.
Yep.
So that will explain that last quarter step up in expenditure, because we know there's a lot of expenditure in that last quarter, and as well as the one-offs that come through as well from the annual reporting side.
I guess just as a final suggestion from my perspective, I don't know, I'm not speaking for other colleagues, it would be helpful to have an update somewhere along the line to this report that clarifies that $2 million overspend, because to me that overspend can only be generated one of two ways: insufficient income, and you suggested COVID has impacted on that, so I accept that, but also that we haven't been able to claw back the expenditure on an equal amount, and that would create an overspend. So using a very simple example, $10 worth of income, $10 worth of expenditure, we realise we're only going to get 9, but we haven't been able to claw back the expenditure cost to 9, so we've got a $1 million overspend. And it'd be helpful for me to know, because I still don't know from what you've told me, where these extra costs are coming in.
So I'm pretty confident Jamie never described it as an overspend.
No.
Well, all right.
There's a $2 million deficit, and there's a huge difference in the terminology there.
Yeah, well, so just as a clarification, Chair, certainly if we get to the year end and there is a $2 million difference between our income and our expenditure at month 12, we will have to find $2 million somewhere. I assume it'll be out of reserves or out of our investments to make the payments in the last month. That was a question.
It was that a comment or a question? Sorry.
Councillor Clark, I'll answer this one, Jamie. That will not be necessarily the case, because we know this, you're looking at a P&L where we will actually be borrowing, because there'll be payments that we'll be making that'll be balance sheet. And also, we are eliminating the subsidies and grants from this discussion, and they are actually cash that we receive, so it does allow us to make payments in that last quarter. I'm looking at page 28 of board books, and on that there does appear at their forecast at year end is showing that there are other expenses. So in several areas of operations, they're expecting to significantly spend slightly more, or 700,000 more than what was originally planned. And with that, together with the reduction in income, which you can see under the income from activities line, is the 2 million which Jamie's speaking about. And those are in a couple of particular areas, and I can't remember them off the top of my head. I'm hoping Jamie can. Solid waste, I think, is one of them.
Yeah, Splash Palace, just with the lockdown periods, and also the closed for the June period, so we've lost the revenue from that space as well. And then, yeah, the Civic Theatre, so they don't have the shows and the bookings like they used to. Yeah, the various activities, most activities have had some sort of impact at some stage.
Thank you.
One final question, if you can be with us, Chair. So I just want to go back to my original question a couple of minutes ago. If we get to the end of the year with a position that's $2 million greater expenditure than we've had income, and I understand what you're saying about the income, that's COVID driven, will we be in a position where we will need to find $2 million at the end of the year, or in the last month?
Patricia, do you want to answer that one?
No.
You don't want to answer it?
No, I will answer it. I think the answer is no. We won't need to. We will be in a cash positive position.
Cool. Thank you. That answers the question. Councillor Pottinger.
Just some clarity, Chair, around the increase in solid waste. Now, I'm assuming that it's solid waste in the red bin, which, because other waste going through the transfer station is paid for, and there wouldn't be any increase because that's user pays. But are you saying there's $1 million increase in the waste, that solid waste collected?
So the recycling and the landfill costs. So the money, because the volumes have gone up, particularly in the landfill, So we're seeing a lot more charging from that because of the weight it's gone through. And also it reflects the recycling contract changes as well from what was initially put into the long-term plan.
Right, because everything, as I said, everything going through the transfer station is paid for and would cover its cost getting to the landfill. The only stuff that's unpredictable is the red bins, because we don't know what people are throwing out, and that could vary dramatically.
Yeah.
And we have to pay for that regardless. It's a fixed rate charge. So obviously, $1 million is a lot of money. So I can't imagine the recycling increase is over 500,000. So you're saying that we've got this variation in just domestic waste?
From the
surely we
what
must
I've
have
been
consistent
so
tonnages.
what I've been informed from the managers, the costs have increased from compared to where we were with the annual long-term plan numbers initially. The contracts have changed. The costs charges have changed as well. So that $1 million is reflecting some of that, as well as the volumes.
And Councillor, I'll just jump in here. We are investigating that at the moment, so we will come back with an update on that one.
Because I'm aware that when we negotiate, well, when I was on WasteNet, when we negotiated prices with the landfill, the landfill would take a hedge. They would give us 3 years of a flat rate, and they would win or lose according to their costs. So we shouldn't really be caught out on solid waste. I mean, we shouldn't be.
Yeah. So I can take that to the manager and we'll talk through that.
There's been a lot of change in waste management, and there's more to come. Watch the MFE space. Thank you. Look, we don't actually have a mover and seconder for the 4 recommendations yet, so let me kick that off. I'll move. Is there a seconder? Councillor Soper. Right. Now, are there any further questions or comments? If not, it's good that we've had some questions and challenges for the report. Thank you, all 3 of you, for your answers. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye. Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Hayden. And Gillian. Noise policy review. Thank you for the paper. Councillors will have read it, but if you could just provide them with a quick overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before, if I may, introduce Gillian Kavanagh to the Council. So she's recently been appointed as a Manager of Environmental Services and is the owner of said Noise Control Policy.
Welcome and thank you, new owner of said Noise Control Policy.
Thank you.
Cool. So the Noise Control Policy was due for routine review, and we've completed some analysis to see if it's still fit for purpose. There were 101 noise complaints made to Council in 2019, with 97% of these coming from private residences. By using the graduated approach in the policy to compliance and enforcement, there only needed to be 164 excessive noise directions issued. Infringements, abatements, and equipment seizure were all in the single digits. We believe this is evidence that the policy and our approach is working well. Whilst reviewing the policy, no major issues were identified. We did identify some areas where we could take a good policy and make it better. We've clarified some points to make sure there can be no ambiguity over when an abatement notice can be issued. We've added in some statements on noise that is covered by other legislation. What happens if seized equipment has not been recovered after 6 months, and further defined what unreasonable noise means. We present the Noise Control Policy today with 2 options for Council: to adopt the policy of consultation with the community, or to adopt it as it stands without consultation. 1,001 complaints is a reasonable number and can affect all sections of the community. While we believe the policy is working well and only recommend minor changes, the public could have differing opinions on this. For this reason, it would not be unreasonable to adopt the policy for consultation with the public. Conversely, we do not think this policy will see high engagement from the community, and given recent trends, we'd be expecting low numbers of submissions. If the policy were to be adopted without consultation, This presents low risk and is an appropriate option as well, given the circumstances. We're happy to take any questions at the council.
Thank you, and thanks for the options. I guess one of the things that we're aware of as we've gone through a few processes of late is getting towards consultation fatigue, and making sure that when we are engaging with the community and recognising there is a difference between engagement and consultation, that we are doing so for stuff that is front of mind. And I guess as community sounding boards, if we were aware of extraordinary concerns around noise control, you'd have, no pun intended, heard from us more. But we haven't. The fact that the numbers are trending low, that there are what would be the expected complaints about a noisy stereo or a noisy car, or someone who's decided to start a welding business next to their neighbours or that sort of thing, is not out of the ordinary. But the fact that you've also taken the opportunity to tighten up around some of the definitions is also really useful, because you know, if we can find areas where there's a bit of ambiguity, if we can tidy that up, then this is a good opportunity for us to do that. I'm happy to move that we receive the report noise control policy review and adopt the policy without consultation, if there's a seconder.
I'll second that.
Councillor Emerson had her hand up first, but it's open for comment. Councillor Pottinger.
Well, I would speak against adoption without consultation. I reckon it's a very public matter. Noise variation is a very tricky thing, because you cannot put a decibel level on it, because it's relative to the ambient noise that you're in. So if you live in a very, very quiet area with low decibel background noise, then a change of say 10 dB is incredibly noticeable, but it may only be still a quiet noise. And subsequently, living in the centre of town, the ambient noise level is much higher, and you don't notice other noises. So it's that difference, and I think that we need to give the public, allow them to put feedback in about this. It's critical. We do it with everything else, and the fact of bypassing this, I think, is not good governance. That's my view.
Noted. Any other comments? Well, let's test the feeling. We have a motion on the table, and that is to receive the report and adopt the policy without consultation, but with the changes as indicated. I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Against.
Councillor Pottinger, Councillor Lewis, would you like your names recorded?
And I am as well, Chair.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Clark. 3 against. The motion is carried. Thank you for the report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Which brings us to the activities report. Which one of our beloved group managers wants to kick off here?
Oh, kia ora koutou, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So I think the report, Mr. McQuay, you're welcome to pop up the front there. So from the Customer and Environment Group, you'll notice it summarises the different activities that we have in place, and you even see some visual evidence of some of the matters we deal with out at Oriti Beach in terms of the submerged vehicle. I just want to acknowledge the breadth of activities that the team actually cover off, but also that we have made some progress on the property file digitisation project with the appointment of a vendor, and what they've been able to discover for us is that we can fast track this project, so we'll have access to the files all going well within 2 years, well within the timeframes that were thought to be what we would have been potentially a 4-year project. We can bring that down and within budget. So I think that's a real positive for Invercargill, and includes working with a vendor from a national vendor but in a local space, so something positive.
It is good news. Thank you. Mr. McFarlane.
Kia ora koutou. Obviously some trends right across our facilities, about a bit of a dip through to because of COVID that we're all familiar with, but it's also some positives there as well. We are monitoring about how we collect the data and present it back to you, because purely physical visits are not our entire range of services that we offer across leisure and rec. So we're going to look at different ways to engage and capture how people are using our services. Other thing I'd like to draw attention to is the progress at the museum for housing and packaging up the contents. It's currently sitting at between 88 and 89, so we're well on track to reach our goals for that particular project.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillors, any questions of the activities report? No? In that case, would somebody like to move that the report is received?
I'll move.
Councillor Rabbits, and seconded, sorry, Councillor Amundsen. Thank you. There's no further comments. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you for that. Councillors, I'm not aware of any other items in public, so I'll move that we go into public excluded to discuss the confirmation of minutes of the PE session of Performance Policy and Partnerships 12 April, the Anderson House occupancy, property investments update, and Invercargill City Holdings Limited purchase of shares for the reasons as outlined under section 72172B.
Second that, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Clark, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I did, Chair. Just one brief issue, and it may not be resolved at this meeting, but when I look through the cluster of papers that were presented by the finance team for the 9 monthly review, there doesn't seem to be a Treasury report attached, which there normally is. And that lists the cash investments that we have sitting. So is that an oversight, or is that a...
Patricia.
For the last 2 quarters, we've changed and not included the Treasury report in the report to PPP, but it's included in the financial risks report to risk and assurance, because that report's more from a risk perspective, so more appropriate to go to that committee.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, back to the motion to move into public excluded. It's been moved and seconded. I'll put it all in favour.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. We are in public excluded, and